reproducible. 1 John 4, verse 11. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. God's calling us to love beyond ourselves, even beyond the walls of this place. That he's called us to be an outreaching church. So this takes us to a new place. It's taken a lot of years, I think, to come to a place where we've been very effective at this. You know, 20-year-old body, and we are the body of Christ, is a mature body. I mean, it's adulthood. And it's like we're finally solidifying who we are, our personality, our culture has emerged to define us, I think, at this point. I think people even in our city look at the Boise Vineyard and they recognize that we are a unique and a distinct people. And so we take this, the love of God, and we let that love flow in us and then ultimately through us, that because we're filled with the Spirit, it flows out of us in ways that we, as in our normal lives and our selfish pasts, you know, probably would have never happened. But now we recognize that there is more to this life than us, that we now grasp the heart of Christ, that other-centeredness, that Christ-likeness, that we desire to give the love that we've received now out and away in very practical ways. This calls us to be the hands and feet of Jesus, that we recognize that discipleship is a verb. It requires action as its state of being. It calls us to get out of our comfort zones and to go out. And so we look at the church in two ways, that it's a local church, but also here at the Boise Vineyard, we say it's also a trans-local church. Years ago, when the church first started, we were up on Northview in the second of our small little facilities. And I remember one morning I was sitting there and I was reading my Bible in my little cubby hole that I called an office. And on the wall above me was a map of the world. And I was sitting there and I was praying. It was one of those times where I kind of visionary prayer. I was saying, Lord, what do you want of this church? It was a brand new little church. I think there was probably 50, 60 of us at that point. And I remember I had this amazing experience that morning. As I recall, it was very early in the morning, and I was sitting there. I looked up, and superimposed on this map was this vision of this wagon wheel. And I mean, it was just like there. And I looked at it, I studied it. I mean, it was just sitting there, and I saw, you know, the hub of this wheel, which was basically Boise. And out of it, though, came these, and the Boise and this valley, kind of the local piece of the church. But out of it came these 7 spokes, 7 wagon wheel spokes. And it was funny, I'd never noticed until that moment, because it was obvious. They weren't perfectly placed. But every spoke crossed a border of Idaho. I didn't realize it until that time, that there's actually 7 borders on the state of Idaho. And that those represented really the national work of this church, as it would reach out and resource other churches within and outside of the Vineyard movement, that we would become an agency by which we would train and resource and equip other churches to do effective ministry. And then, of course, it was hooked to this great wagon rim, the wheel rim. And that really was it encompassed the earth, the world. It was what we call now the global vision. That is, local and global vision. That that God would establish this small work in Boise, Idaho, with this vision and these values, and out of it we would reach out to other churches nationally through conferencing and through materials and through the work on our website and whatever else that we would do, seminars and people coming to visit and just to see what's going on here. And ultimately we would take that same heart then through our missions work to the world. Well, you know, you can't make those things happen. But through the years, God has really done that from this place. This has become a hub of activity for churches all across the country, and work that now has gone out, even as we've been training young people and other people to go out into the world to take on some major issues of crisis in ministry. So out of that came the vision, I might say a subvision of the Boise Vineyard for reform. Reform was a vision where we realized there was a need to bring unity to the church, nationally and internationally. Both the church, as local churches like our own, but also the parachurch, organizations and agencies that were working in areas of world crisis. And to really bring those people together that they might work together. So people that were maybe working in the area of world hunger or world health or the environmental world condition or literacy, all of these, we categorized the world into 7 areas of crisis and decided that we were going to believe that God would use us to draw these leaders nationally together to cross-pollinate each other, that we might then model for other local churches across the country, churches that were actually taking on issues like human trafficking and other areas of social injustice. But remember, we would do it first after capturing the heart of God over these issues. And so came the vision for reform. But reform is only effective in the fact that it's totally connected to the heart vision of the Boise Vineyard. Without the Boise Vineyard thriving and healthy, it could never happen. That we literally then could make a greater impact on the world around us. As a result, we then would be an agency that would reproduce these values, reproduce our faith, reproduce ministry, reproduce this heart of grasping the ministry of Jesus as stated in Isaiah 61, but also in Luke 4, as Jesus stated it himself and said, "This is my job description, to go to the brokenhearted, to set the captive free, to minister to the prisoner, to preach the gospel to the poor." This was the heart of the ministry of Jesus. Now we would take that commission and through the work of this church, take it beyond ourselves and begin to reproduce the ministry of Jesus around the world, joining other like-hearted, like-minded ministries and churches who even have gone before us on these things, but bring unity to this work, that we actually might make a more unified effort and a greater impact on the world. That's happening right now. To make mature, authentic, Spirit-filled, reproducible, and finally, Christian disciples. Again, we always say that discipleship has to show action. It's a verb. A couple of years ago, we coined the word adventure, Advent-URE, really calling our people to the great adventure of taking all of this now out into the streets and into the world. We said that the greatest adventure is living this life of radical faith between the first and the second advent of Jesus, the first and second coming of Jesus. This is Christian discipleship, claiming for ourselves to be our own, Matthew 28, to go to all the world to preach the gospel and to really receive the commission of Jesus, doing it in the commands of Jesus, that is to love God and to love each other. Simply stated, the Boise Vineyard is called to make mature, authentic, Spirit-filled, reproducible Christian disciples under the banner of 1 John 4:7 and 8, to receive the love of God and then go and radically love people. That is the heart and the vision of the Boise Vineyard.